Do Europeans understand how poor they are? And what will happen when they find out? These are the rhetorical questions that opened a recent op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, questions that we are going to try and answer here today. Welcome to the Atlantic Current. I'm Vince Martin from Wall Street in Maine. Here, as always, is Tull McAdoo from the Irish Politics newsletter. First, Tull, I've got to ask, do you understand how poor you are?
Hello, listeners. And hello, especially to my American listeners who think I'm living in penury and poverty compared to my cousin Vincent. Yes, Vincent, the familiar Wall Street Journal concern for the downtrodden European. Usually it's Ireland they're focusing on. The last time Ireland was seen where we were sipping our espressos, taking our state-subsidised public transport to our jobs with legally mandated holidays, which works out about 4 weeks a year for everybody here in Europe. And we're not particularly worried about going bankrupt over a broken ankle either. And so the premise, I think, that Europe is incredibly poor requires a heroic act of mental gymnastics, a fantastic act of imagination worthy of Hollywood, Vincent. To read the article, it made us sound like we were all walking around like extras in a Dickens novel. Blissfully unaware of our supposed destitution, waiting for a Goldman Sachs analyst to arrive and explain that actually we're very, very poor and we don't realise how poor we are. Because, our GDP per capita doesn't include 3 pickup trucks and a medical GoFundMe after you break said wrist. Do I strike you as a Dickensian character, Vincent?
You hadn't until I read this article, and now I'm concerned. Maybe this is just one of those things I never noticed until somebody pointed it out. I mean, it's like when you go to Paris, everyone tells you, oh, it's beautiful. But then if you think about it, I mean, look, all the houses are 200 years old?
Yeah. Terrible.
There's a big hunk of metal right in the middle of the city. It used to be a radio tower or something, and they don't even have the money to tear it down and build strip malls and housing developments and parking lots. So yeah, I'm worried is what I'm saying. I'm worried for you.
Vincent, I said to you before, I mean, if you go to Florence, the buildings there are 500, 600, 700, 800 years old. That's how poor. That's how poor they are. That's how poor they are.
Yeah. No, yeah, just no funds to replace them for that. Well, I mean, look, that's what happens with communism. This is what communism does. That's what Americans always say.
Yeah, I mean, I was in a place called Dubrovnik as also recently. I mean, they still have their city walls. Their city walls, they still have, their city walls are 1,500 years old. They still have them. It's incredible.
Crazy. So they don't have any generative artificial intelligence tools built into them, no surveillance cameras. I mean,
nothing.
It's literally primitive. I mean, that's the word you would use for that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's one historical notch up from Neanderthalism, I think, maybe, I mean, would you believe, and you're not going to believe this, there's a place in County Meath, right? And the place is 5,000 years old. It's older than Stonehenge.
How about that?
Okay. And people should go to it and visit it. At the 21st of December, at the winter solstice every year, the light comes down the tunnel, illuminates the whole building. A marvel, an architectural marvel.
But does nothing for GDP.
Does nothing for GDP, no, absolutely nothing. And my thing with this article, Vincent, it got my hackles up. No, it doesn't take much, says you.
Yeah.
So there's an almost charming innocence to it. Americans look at Europe and see smaller houses, fewer zeros on their salaries, and conclude this must be poverty.
Yeah.
Penury. Rather like judging a man starving because he's eating a dinner instead of a 64-ounce steak, kind of, if that's the right analogy to go for, And it has to be said from Europe's point of view, looking back across the Atlantic, we see a country where wealth is abundant, there's no doubt about that. But healthcare is optional, and only if you can afford it. And nobody believes in retiring over there, I heard. Is that true?
Not entirely true, but a little bit of truth to that, yeah.
So if this is poverty, Vincent, it's kind of a strange kind of poverty that we're living in here in Europe. One with functioning public transport, longer life expectancy, and the radical luxury of not having to check your bank balance before you break your wrist. So no, Vincent, to get to the Wall Street article, and I must point out, this is not the view of all Americans either. This is one article,
sure. Yeah.
I don't mean to be so sarcastic, but actually I do. But No, we don't know or realise how poor we are, Vincent, mostly because we're too busy living lives that don't require us to find out the hard way.
That's a great line. I love that one. Yeah, I mean, it is just one article, but it's useful to discuss because this is a debate that's been happening in a lot of places among a lot of people in a lot of different ways. And one of the problems that the article has, which is a problem shared by the broader argument that usually comes from the U.S., that, oh, Europe is falling behind, Europe is sclerotic, all these sorts of things, is that, as you alluded to, it's measuring things in money. And one of the very big debates that this article just kind of skips past is the fact that the people who are doing those measurements have been having pretty intense debates over the measurement of GDP. And that's what really jumped out to me, having spent time in Europe. He makes the point that Britain's GDP per capita is now along the lines of Mississippi, which is one of the lowest income states in the U.S. Well, I've been to Britain and I've been to Mississippi. And if you're going to tell me the living standards in those two places are the same, no. You do kind of want to send the guy an email. Have you been to Britain and Mississippi? Because if your numbers are saying that those are the same two economies, the first question you should ask is, well, is something wrong with these numbers? Because that just does not seem right.
No, it doesn't seem right. And I will point out there, outside the main cities in the United Kingdom, that there's a bit of poverty going on in the north.
Oh, for sure.
Like Sunderland now and, Sheffield. Well, Sheffield's up and coming, but there is a lot of poverty there and some real downside.
Yeah, and they have Rust Belt cities, but so does the U.S.
Yes. But the main argument here is GDP is just not correct, is it? How they're measuring it, essentially, because what's going on here at the moment is when they spoke about the GDP of the United States, the GDP he's measuring against 27 different countries with 27 different lifestyles, 27 different cultures. He also neglects to mention that Brexit messed with the GDP of Europe as a whole quite significantly. He talks about France and Germany, their GDPs are 58, 52k, something like that to that effect. And Ireland's is 120,000 euros. Okay. Luxembourg's is 140. Norway's is 100,000. And Norway's a very oil-rich country. They have a $2 trillion sovereign wealth fund.
Right.
Iceland is 90k. The Scandinavian countries are quite high. But ultimately, when you're measuring GDP, it's like measuring what I'm worth against what Conor McGregor's worth and trying to find the average there. You're the finance guy in this podcast, Vincent? Would that be a fair analogy?
There's a little bit of that. If the average GDP per capita is higher, it doesn't mean that the GDP of the average person is necessarily greater because we have such wealth skewed higher. Those numbers that you're talking about, the risk of really getting too far in the weeds, a big factor in all of this and in the debates over measurement is technology. So you said, for instance, Ireland's per capita GDP is significantly higher. That's in large part because of the presence of U.S. multinationals in the country. And even in some cases, that's based on how they account for their revenue, not even, the extent to which that revenue is actually really affecting the economy on the island. Paul Krugman, who was a longtime opinion writer for the New York Times, won the Nobel Memorial Prize in Economics last decade. He's made the point that technology alone pretty much explains the gap in productivity between the U.S. and Europe. He wrote this on his Substack earlier this year. This difference in industrial mix causes differences in real GDP growth that aren't reflected in different trends and living standards. And this is a huge point. It's one he makes elsewhere, which is the U.S. is developing these technologies and they're in our GDP. But Europe benefits from those technologies as well. So they're in your living standards, even though they're not in your economic numbers. It's up for debate. Among the people who do this, there is a significant academic debate over how do you run these numbers? How do you account for technology? How do you account for the fact that in categories like smartphones and televisions, where prices have been falling for decades, that different countries measure those declines differently? It is kind of a giant mess. So, and you can spend, 3 weeks trying to get through the model, or I think you can do what the journal writer should have done, which is just take a step back and think about what the you're talking about and what's going on. Like, to your point, like, look, maybe not out the window, but look on your computer at what's going on in Europe. Travel. And those opening questions too, man, I mean, they are just such an encapsulation of American arrogance. Yeah, this entire continent of people who, by the way, have much more education than the average American in multiple ways. God, what are they going to do when they realize they're poor? What are they going to do when they figure out what I already know? It really is just a just a Twitter post turned into an op-ed in so many ways.
Well, the post had, nearly 6 million views on X and another 5 million on LinkedIn and another, 2 or 3 million on Facebook. Yeah. So clickbait headlines and all that, and we should name the guy actually while we're here. It's Joseph C. Sternberg is his name. And he's quite a stern fellow. He's doing what he says on the tin there. He's quite stern. Sternberg stern.
And let me interrupt real quick, if you don't mind, just because he's been on that editorial board for 20 years. So let's point out that he's actually part of the WSJ. We've talked a couple times about other op-eds that are written by people who are not part of the paper, who are just kind of writing guest posts on the op-ed. He's part of their board. So that is a little bit different than some of the ones we've talked about in the past.
He's an educated man, is he?
He is an educated man. I've read him on and off for years on the Journal's op-ed page. And I am a little surprised by the simplistic nature of this case. I think he's done better work, let's put it that way. But the Journal has also gone a little bit Fox News light in the last few years. I think they really can't, from a credibility standpoint, jump completely behind Trump. And they still will criticize him, particularly when he goes against kind of conservative economic orthodoxy. But they have definitely drafted in on some of the cultural war stuff, some of the attack, the left with questionable logic and material, that sort of things. I have gotten the sense the last few years that they're kind of trying to tiptoe between not having their credibility completely destroyed when Trump is gone, but also not completely losing his supporters, many of whom do, read the Journal.
Yes, I think that's a fair. I think it's a fair analysis before you Vincent, because for a long time it was a venerable Bible in the financial circles, and it gets quoted a lot in Ireland. Dan O'Brien, prominent Irish economist, is quite fond of pointing out when the Wall Street Journal is kicking Ireland around the place, which is quite regularly. I was looking at it, and when he asks in the article, why don't they do anything about it? Listen, pal, we're sitting over here, we're drinking our a €4 bottle of wine, chain smoking, while we're enjoying our 4-week holiday somewhere in the south of France or Italy that we flew to from Dublin for about $100.
Yeah.
And we are not fazed at all by, would it be fair to call it extreme capitalism? The United States is in the grip of extremes capitalism, hyper-capitalism that we haven't seen since the 80s.
Capitalism.
You just call it capitalism, yeah.
What's extreme about it? I mean, I say that kind of jokingly, but as you think about it, we don't see it as extreme, certainly. You can get to that idea in the op-ed. This is all perspective, right? We're working the right amount. We're innovating the right amount. Our priorities are in the right place. You guys are the ones who essentially are not working hard enough and aren't allowing government to let loose the capitalist engine. Whereas, as we've discussed so many times on this podcast, the view from Europe into the U.S. is our government isn't doing enough, right? Our government, capitalism is too extreme. It's too unfettered. It's too unequal. Relative to the world as a whole, and particularly to the Western world, yeah, we are extreme. We are an outlier in terms of capitalism, and people who are on the WSJ op-ed board will usually wear that as a badge of honor.
Right, okay, that's fair enough. Greed is good and all that, and I suppose it is in some instances, but, Yale did a study in 2025. They published a study, right? It was ranking America in healthcare, happiness, education. So this is amongst what they'd class first world nations, which is basically Western Europe, the United States, and Canada. Okay. Is that probably fair? Maybe Australia, New Zealand as well, also Singapore, Japan. I'm sure I'm leaving out some other countries. Sorry about that. So the United States ranks last in first world countries amongst healthcare. We did an episode on healthcare and we spoke about that. We link it in the Substack for people. It was our least listened to podcast.
We rank last in healthcare outcomes, and it's incredibly uneven. That's not a perception thing. That's a data thing, right? That is absolutely true.
Happiness, 24th. I don't know how to measure that. Just give me a beer and a big fat Cuban cigar and I'm usually happy. So I kind of write that off because it's such an airy fairy kind of thing. Education's 26th.
That seems right.
Does it? I meet a lot of educated Americans that always surprises me. Life expectancy, and this surprised me also because I thought she'd be number 1 or 2, and I think we spoke about this also, 46th.
Yeah, it depends on what year they were looking at, but we had that fentanyl epidemic, which thankfully is starting to finally fade somewhat. That was large enough that it actually affected our numbers. But even aside from that, we have gun deaths, auto accidents. Stereotypically, we prioritize individual freedom over everything else, and that in turn gives Americans more freedom to do things that unfortunately shorten their life expectancy.
Free press. The World Press Index was released last week. They do an annual report. The United States went from, I think it was, 20-something down to 57th in the world rankings. And that's because of one man and one man only, just because of Trump.
Yeah, we have Kash Patel initiating investigations into a journalist just in the last couple of days over the story that we covered last month. So, yeah, I can see that for sure.
Everything else is fixable, but that's the most worrying one, I think,
Yeah.
Social mobility is quite low, it's 27th, and income inequality, which gets to the nobody issue with GDP, it's last in the Western world, apparently. So,
if you asked me to guess where we were, I would have guessed last. I don't think that's a surprise.
Now, I don't want to seem like I'm pissing all over the United States here. So what is America actually good at, Vincent?
Well, what are we actually good at? We're good at lots of stuff. We're good at creating artificial intelligence models that may or may not hasten the end of humanity. We're good at addictive social media platforms.
Yes.
We seem pretty good at making hyper-intelligent weapons. In all seriousness, I don't want to take the opposite side of the WSJ author and just wind up being like, oh no, he's actually completely wrong. It's the US that's the and Europe is the happy
Nirvana. Yeah.
They are just different models. And that, one of the things I always find funny about this debate in all its forms is people just kind of seem to ignore that. Like, people in Europe have made political choices based on their culture and their individual desires, and people in America have made political choices for the same reason, and those choices are different. So we have different systems.
Yes.
And there is kind of this urge of people on both sides to go, well, one's better than the other. No, I don't think that's true. I think both have.
I do. I think.
Yeah, I don't know. To me, as I'm getting older, I look at it and I go, there's just a very easy answer here, which is you work in America till you're 55, run yourself as much as you can, as hard as you can, make what you can. And then you find, one of those 27 countries in the EU with your golden passport and you just chill. That to me seems like the way to do it. But in that context of trying to not be cartoonish, of trying to not be completely anti-US here and completely anti-journal for that matter, do you think there's any validity to the point that Sternberg makes? He does cite a report from Mario Draghi, right?
Draghi, yes. Famously during the crash in 2008, he said Europe is going to do whatever is required. And he did. And now I'm paraphrasing, but it was along those lines. It was a very, we'll fight them on the beaches moment from Brussels, So we will do whatever is required. And they did. They did.
Yeah. They absolutely did.
They absolutely did. So, yeah.
Yeah, people have forgotten how terrifying things were 15 years ago, I think. That memories have been very short about some of the predictions that were being made around Europe and how the economies were going to go. They actually do deserve some credit. But that WSJ article cites a report from a commission, which itself was, when I was reading the report, I was like, oh boy, this is kind of European. They announced in 2024 that they're going to do a report on competitiveness, and it came out a year later.
Yes. Very European behavior.
As an American, I was like, well, I don't know. This itself is kind of evidence for our side. But he did a report, which I think is not nearly as dire. He's not calling his fellow Europeans poor, but it does suggest that government is too restrictive. He makes the point that no company in Europe that has been founded in the last 50 years has a market capitalization over 100 billion euro, while there are dozens of those companies in the U.S. Do you think there's any credibility to the case the WSJ is making, even if the way they're making it is pretty insulting, let's say?
There's two things here, Vincent, and I'll touch on them both separately. And one of them goes back to your earlier point. But yes, Europe is a little bit uncompetitive in terms of industry, innovation, competition. Regulations are quite stringent sometimes. But they're done in the interest of protecting Europe as a whole, okay? And sometimes they don't work. But by and large, the continent has been at peace now for 70 years, over 70 years, 80 years.
Right.
Okay, now a war, as Matt broke out. There's a war on our eastern flank, a massive war, the largest land war since World War II. So we're focused on that in the moment rather than, GDP per capita. Most Europeans genuinely do not give a about per capita income at all, full stop. I definitely don't. I might vaguely look at my pension portfolio the odd time, or the wife does, or the kids does, in case I drop dead from drinking too much red wine, smoking too many cigars.
And talking too much politics.
Yeah, talking too much politics. I'll give you an aneurysm in no time. Now, you touched on something there earlier about the Wall Street Journal walking a fine line between appeasing Trump and opposing Trump, was the gist of what you were saying.
Yeah.
But I think it's quite telling, and I've seen it across social media since Trump took power, that Europe is poor, Europe's a shit, Europe's the worst place in the world. West Cork is like downtown Baghdad. It is awful, And this Euro-poor discourse migrating from the terminally MAGA online lot to a Wall Street Journal op-ed is actually a big enough tell, I think.
Yeah.
When the narratives stop being a meme and, it becomes establishment messaging, for want of a better kind of terminology, it kind of means the establishment needs it. You simply don't reach for Europe is poor unless your domestic numbers have become very hard to spin for the regime. The Trump regime, I don't call it an administration. I'm on the record of that, and that's why I can't go to the United States anytime soon.
Yeah.
Burner phone and all. So I think they're the 2 points. Yes, I probably could have said this in 90 seconds. Yes, the Wall Street Journal does have a point. Europe lags behind in competitiveness, business innovation, all that kind of thing. But at the same time, the Wall Street Journal are pandering to Trump, and they've taken, online far-right memes about Europe being and now they're putting them on op-ed pages.
Yeah, I think there's probably some truth to that. They are no longer immune to those narratives. We've talked so many times now about how the right-wing discourse really starts online, on social media, at the furthest edges of the party, and into the broader right-wing media, including Fox News and nowadays the Journal. And so your point is really interesting to see that from the outside, because that kind of gets to my idea, which again is that they've been trying to ride the wave a little bit without jumping in full bore. And so that does make some sense. And by the way, to highlight a little bit of the dishonesty here in social media, and to be honest, in the Journal itself, people on the American right also of late really want to play the card that Europe is a parasite off America, right? Europe is benefiting from America's largesse around defense spending and American bases on the continent and all these sorts of things. And combined with this Euro-poor stuff, it can't be both, right? You got to pick a side. Either Europe is making choices that are leading its economies to fall behind to such an extent that its citizens literally don't know what's coming, or what Trump and his supporters are saying about Europe freeloading its way to prosperity, stealing from the United States. Trump has said the EU was literally founded to rip off the United States. Well, that can't be true at the same time. You do have to kind of pick one. And I think the fact that even the Journal itself is taking both tacks gets to that idea that they're being a little Fox News light, right? They're taking some of the tactics of the online right. They're leaning into negativity and finger pointing and on occasion outrage.
I will say this, Vincent, right? I used to read the Wall Street Journal quite religiously. Maybe in the last 3-4 years, the quality of their output has deteriorated somewhat. It's still seen as the Bible in the United States. Is it the financial Bible, is it? Is that a fair... I've heard commentators in Ireland say, the financial Bible of the United States is giving Ireland a kicking again. Is that true? It is the financial Bible, or is it not?
What's funny is kind of in the modern world, I think it's harder to make those assessments. It's a case, at least in my view, that you really have to separate the news division and the op-ed division. I don't think the quality of their news, particularly financial news, has changed at all. I think where you have seen a shift is in their op-ed, moving from really being traditional, small c, conservative, pro-business, pro-free enterprise viewpoint towards dabbling, let's say, in some of the right-wing media techniques. And the most prominent of those techniques is to go after people in often sensational terms. And I think, to me, as I look at it from an outsider, that's the trap that they keep falling into, whether that's Europe or whether that's people on the left. They've jumped into the cultural wars, for instance.
Stay in your lane, stick to finance.
Yeah. So I think stick to finance. And they had an op-ed page, which I think was a little more thought-provoking, let's say, as opposed to an article like this, which we've had fun with it. We've criticized it. But if you take a step back just as an article, it kind of doesn't really say anything. There's nothing that really jumps out. Even as an American reader, you don't read it and go, oh, I learned something, or, oh, that's an interesting take, which is something that I do think the Journal's op-ed page was pretty good with in the past. It's just not a good article. Let's put it that way.
Who owns the Wall Street Journal?
Well, not coincidentally, what we're talking about, it's part of the Murdoch empire, right?
Ah, yes, a famously unbiased media mogul himself. How old is he? He's like 140 or something, isn't he?
Yeah, God, he's like 93 or something. Yeah.
Good grief. Yes, I mean, he's going to outlive me.
Yeah, it was a big deal when he bought the Journal. I think that was back in 06 or 07, something like that. And people at the time were legitimately worried that he was going to destroy the quality of their journalism. And he promised that he wouldn't. And I think he actually has kind of kept that promise, probably about as good as Rupert Murdoch was going to keep that promise. So, certainly I think he'd say the worst case scenario hasn't played out. But yeah, you do see the imprint of Murdoch and maybe his son, Lachlan, who I think has become a pretty aggressive guy. I think you see their imprint, their impact on the op-ed page in the last couple of years.
Now, Vincent, far be it from me to, wring the Wall Street Journal's neck for their editorial and publication standards, okay? Irish publications are not immune to this also. There was a headline caught my eye during the week. And I posted on LinkedIn and I got some outrage, and I had all the Irish independent journalists unfollow me on social media after I posted my analysis of the article. And I'm not joking, they all unfollowed me. So the long and short of it was, the IDA boss, it's a Irish Development Authority, its primary function is to attract inward investment into Ireland.
Right.
Okay. That's its only goal. Bring in the wonga, bring in the cash, bring in those dollars via investment, via jobs, via R&D, via data centers, whatever you have in yourself. You come to Ireland, we will look after you, pal. That's the deal. Okay.
Yeah, I know what the IDA is, because in the first pilot we tried to record, that was the head of the IDA who was on CNBC, who wound up in one of the most insane interviews in the history of financial media. We tried to do this whole thing. It didn't work, but he was being asked about why Ireland had the euro and all this stuff.
That's right, yes.
Yeah, that brings back Martin Shanahan was the head at the time. I mean, he was on CNBC to promote Ireland as a destination for capital to investors who watch CNBC. So yeah, that's their role. I get it.
And he wound up giving them a geopolitical history lesson about why Ireland was in the euro.
An Irish-American anchor is asking him why Ireland has the euro, not the pound. And then he's saying Northern Ireland should have the euro. And yeah, we'll put that on the Substack. It's worth highlighting because that was just one of the most unbelievable live train wrecks in the history of financial television. But go ahead. I'm sorry. Detour.
Well, yes. Sorry, we want to go off on a tangent. So Michael Lohan has replaced Shanahan. I think he replaced him in 2023. And since he took over, he's done a sterling job. He's surpassed himself. We have 312,000 people, employed directly by multinational companies in Ireland. The majority of American, I must say, about 70% of them, I think. So,
I mean, that's what, like 10% of your adult population?
Yeah, thereabouts, yeah.
Huge number, yeah.
Yeah, investments in 2025 were up 38% in 2024. Okay. They were expected to create under about 15,000 jobs thereabouts. And this included 78 new name companies coming into the country. They're always going to bring their research and development anyway, because it's going to, earn them a lot of money in the tax dollars. Between 2021 and 2024, I think it took in about 900 investments and created 76,000 jobs.
Very good. Great.
Okay. So this guy's job, essentially, is to go around the world, meeting people, meeting, the heads of pharma companies, the head of Intel, the head of Apple, Meta, take your pick of the big wigs, year on year to keep securing more investment for Apple in Cork, which employs something stupid like, 6,000 to 7,000 people down there in Cork City. And there was a headline in the Irish Independent, and the long and short of it was, IDA boss Michael Owen clocked up 60,000 air miles last year. All right. Now, the article was very matter of fact, and I thought nothing of it till I saw a message in a WhatsApp group I'm in, and somebody said, like, look at the IDA guy, he's flying around the world, he's clocked up 60,000 miles, last year. And Tull lost the head. Tull lost the head completely. And like, are you mad? Yeah. Are you mad? I was quite exercised by the whole thing, It was a local, local village WhatsApp group, and I was thinking to myself, you off your face.
Yeah.
This same person texting into the group is working for an American multinational. The Industrial Development Authority was formed in 1949, and in typical Irish vagueness, when they were set out, they were to explore new investment opportunities in the country without being actually told what to do.
Right.
Took them a couple of decades to find their feet, but they really kicked off in the late 90s, and they brought in an incredible amount of inward investment. Now, of course, Ireland's corporation tax helps immensely also. So that person was working for an American multinational, Vincent. And I'm thinking to myself, do they have no self-awareness? Are they completely oblivious to what's going on here? This person is working for a pharma company up in the mountains, and I'm thinking to myself, you're earning a lot of money, and the only reason you're earning a lot of money, and you have your 3 cars, and you're practically mortgage free and a massive pension, is because the IDA secured investment into this part of the country, which quite frankly is the nowhere. And this is the IDA's job, just to bring these companies in and just plant them down somewhere with the least regulatory hassle. Everything's going to run smoothly. The roads are built. The airports are there. The infrastructure's there. Our education system is top notch. We people that are able to say Viagra and microprocessor without slurring their words. Bang for your buck. The IDA in Ireland are the single most successful civil service outfit, that serve the state, okay? And there's a certain kind of gotcha at the moment going on in Irish politics when it comes to spending and when it comes to receipts and when it comes to, holding people to account. But quite frankly, these people are worth every single penny. The article said, and the article was very matter of fact, it was. But when you look at a headline and somebody that is not immersed in politics and that kind of stuff, somebody is unschooled as to what the IDA does and goes about, when they see a headline saying, the IDA boss travelled 60,000 miles last year, they're thinking he's going on junkets. They don't understand what he's doing or what he's at. He's out there, getting face to face with people and investors. And I wonder, with the standard of journalism, we were talking about the Wall Street Journal there, the cancer at the heart of journalism is really kind of quite pronounced now at the moment, isn't it?
The article itself is matter of fact, but the question you ask is, why is this article getting published? It's not news. 60,000 miles is not even a lot. Like,
no.
If there's some angle to it, but it is one of those things. And the journalist who wrote it would say, I didn't make any accusations. I didn't make any implications. I just wrote a piece of news. Well, it's not news. This is not a thing, right? Okay. Yeah, that's what it's supposed to be. Why did you do this? Why are you putting this in front of me? This is not interesting. So I get that. I think what I said about the journal trying to kind of thread the needle, so to speak, as you put it so well, between opposition and appeasement. I think that's, you see that in America here too. If you stick purely to your principles and say, we're just going to be a journalistic outlet, you just probably can't stay in business. You have to play the clickbait. You have to play the online advertising. You have to play the social media game at least a little bit. And because there's just so much content out there. If you just say, oh, well, we're just going to put things up on our website. Well, how are you getting anyone to read it? I sympathize with the author and also with your frustration that it's a good way to wind up with skewed coverage. It doesn't seem like it needs to happen. Maybe don't play the clickbait game over one of the greatest success stories in European government of the last couple decades, which I don't think is an exaggeration.
No, it's not an exaggeration. This guy, Lohan, I mean, if you paid him $1 for every $1 million he brought in, he'd still be underpaid, you know, that kind of way. I mean, he's
I'm just going to interrupt and point out that's a pretty American argument about CEOs. That's the same argument you get when Tesla shareholders defend Elon Musk getting a pay package that winds up being worth $50 billion. But
now I'll give you a funny story related to this article. He flew 74,000 miles in 2024, so he's down. And somebody came into my LinkedIn comments, right, and said, well, I don't think he's doing enough. I don't think he's flying enough for a CEO.
Yeah, you can make that case. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, what is it, 10,000 miles to California from Ireland or thereabouts?
Probably, so, yeah. It's only a few trips a year.
So, I mean, there was two trains of thought on this. One, the framing of the headline is quite egregious. And secondly, the people on LinkedIn think he should be flying some more.
Well, we'll see what Irish GDP for 2026 looks like. Because if it's not 12%, then he needs to get his ass to the airport, right?
Get his bloody finger out, yes.
I am sympathetic to everyone involved here. It is hard for media, and I think particularly local media, to survive. We've known that for a long time, and it's not getting any easier.
Yes, Vincent, it's impossible not to see contemporary journalism in a kind of slaughterhouse at the moment because of people like you and I.
That's true. Yeah, we're sitting here talking about the problem that we are absolutely contributing.
Creating, take your Substack, take my Irish Politics newsletter, over 10,000 subscribers, everybody listening to our podcast in the United States and Ireland. We're trying to do something a little bit different that the traditional media wasn't doing in Ireland or the United States. We are sitting here complaining about the standards of old media and clickbait, while new media, you and I on our podcast, our Substack, are coming and trying to eat old media's lunch. Yeah. We're trying to have our cake and eat it. We, my friend, are as guilty as anybody else for the demise of old media.
I'm not apologizing for it. I'm an American. This is what America is. This is why our GDP is so high. It's because we believe in disruption. We believe in going after the old. We believe in tearing down historical monuments. And that is why we have all the money and Europe is on its way out, right?
That's it, Vincent. You're the innovator here, and I'm just a laissez-faire passenger on your new venture. Stay with us, listeners, and to see how this new venture pans out. Okay?
Please do.
And thank you again to all our new listeners. I'm Tull from the Irish Politics newsletter.
And I'm Vince Martin from Wall Street, Maine.
Thank you, folks. Bye-bye.